The snow is certainly eased up considerably. It's just the white stuff on the field that's the problem. Let's see how well they do. The first man coming up is Ralph Garr, the left fielder for the White Sox, who's hit 300 or better in 4 of his 6 seasons in the major leagues. A 300 average in 1976. So Bill Singer will face a tough hitter, left-hander Ralph Garr.
And one of the fastest base runners in the American League, Don.
Here it is, the first pitch in Blue Jay history. It's a strike with a fastball. That ball has been exchanged and will go to the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame.
The Canadian Sports Hall of Fame.
Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1706 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Yes, we are open. An award-winning podcast from Moneris, hosted by FOTM El Grego. Toronto Maple Leafs Baseball. Be at Christie Pitts tonight, June 6th, for the first Friday Night Lights game of the season. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. Building Toronto's Skyline, a podcast and book from Nick Iones, sponsored by Fusion Corp, Construction Management Inc., and Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Joining me today, returning to Toronto Mic'd, it's Keegan Matheson. Welcome back, Keegan.
Thank you for having me, Mike. What is this, 4, 5?
6?
6? Wow.
I don't know, but I wanted to give you kudos off the top. Are you comfortable receiving kudos?
Boy, I have 1% of that left in me after this week. One more. All
right. Yeah, I just had Pakin over for his exit interview, and everybody's praising him because the agenda is coming to an end at the end of the month. And he said it's like attending his own funeral. Like, people say nice things about you, and you've had a good week. Okay, so I want the listenership to know I was at your book launch yesterday, and I witnessed firsthand your adoring public coming out, taking photos with you, getting an autograph. You have a new book out. So tell me about this event last night and the name of your new book.
The name of the new book, the franchise, Toronto Blue Jays, Curated History of the Toronto Blue Jays.
Well, if you wrote the book, of course it's curated.
Curated by me. A curator sounds very fancy, almost as fancy
like, is it
as
supposed
author.
to come from, I don't know, Mount Sinai or something?
Come on. But the event last night was the official launch of it, and we had that at Sportsnet Grill inside the Toronto Marriott City Centre, which some of you might know is just the Windows restaurant out in left field. But I love that space. It was the perfect place to do it. We were overlooking the field. They took incredible care of us, and it was fun, man. The afternoon going in, I was full-blown anxiety attack. Does anybody come to these things? Like, how do we...
I know this feeling.
And it's all of these events that we're lining up for signings and events. There's always some form of the question, like, so how many people do you think will come?
Right.
Which is a veiled way of asking, like, how many people like you? and I don't know. So I was very anxious going there, and then I lifted my head up, and the line was up out the door.
Yeah, I witnessed. I took a photo. There were actual people. They didn't look like paid actors.
No.
And what I took note of is how young your fan base was. Like, maybe it's because I just turned 50, and somebody will call me out that it's been almost a year since I turned 50. So that's not I just turned 50, but I am 50. And I think everybody's my age. Like, this is a weird phenomenon where you think everybody is like, oh, remember the 90s? And it's like, I wasn't born in the 90s. Okay, but I noticed that you had a youth contingent of Blue Jay fanatics who were so excited to meet you and to buy your book and have you sign it.
That part's cool, man. It's because I think when a lot of people think baseball, they think older crowd who's been around for a while. But that that means a lot to me, to see like younger people excited about the game. And it's a different level of fandom, too. It's a different type of fandom. I find the younger fans are much more interested and much more in love with players and personalities. And that's a good thing. Like, I really think that is a good thing. I got a couple of, I'm not wearing them right now. I should be. I will be on some TV hits and going back to the games. A couple of little friendship bracelets with the franchise written across it. So they were customized for me.
Amazing.
But it's that meant the world to me, man. Like seeing people come out for it. It's, the book isn't free. People's time is not free. It was just really humbling. And I did not think it would be like that. It shocked me in the very best of ways.
So congrats to you, not only on your successful event yesterday, even though I noticed I couldn't get a Great Lakes beer there, but I'm just nitpicking now. Great Lakes has sent over some fresh craft beer for you, Keegan, to bring home with you today.
Love it. This will be put to very good use after the week that's been.
Right. And your next book, whatever, I know people are like, let's talk about the next book, but you can do the book launch. That was a great location yesterday. It's the first time I was ever at that Sportsnet Grill or whatever. And in a moment, I'm going to shout out FOTMs I chatted with at that event. And then the two future FOTMs I confirmed at your event. So I'm going to shout that out in a moment. But when you do put out your next book, I recommend having your launch at the GLB Brew Pub at Jarvis and Queens Quay.
I was talking to our friend Troy the other day, and I said I need to get down there. I'm really excited to go down there. And I'm kind of back into being a beer guy. I was off beer for a while. It's just
you're a whiskey guy?
I was having some stomach problems, aging quicker than I should. Right. It turns out just the entire rest of my lifestyle was giving me a hard time, not the beer, and I was blaming the beer for it. Right. But man, I was having a Canuck Pale Ale on a podcast the other day. I'm excited for this.
It's a Mexican lager.
Mexican lager here, especially. But I love our friends at GLB. That's not even an ad. I love them.
Well, it's an ad and it's the truth. Okay, so I see you're rocking a coffee right now. So you just tell me when you're ready to switch to beer, and then I'll crack mine with you.
You
so
got her.
No rush. I know you got to finish your coffee first here. So I will tell you, Keegan, before I shout out the FOTMs I saw at your event, and then this is going to be all killer, no filler. We're going to talk about the Blue Jays franchise. Yeah. And again, congrats on the book. Some people who listen to this program struggle to read a book, and you wrote a book. Like, how long did it take you to write the book?
I signed the deal December 2023 at those winter meetings, which people know as the Ohtani winter meetings in Nashville. So it has been a year and a half, and I'm not a patient person, so this has been difficult for me. I'm used to showing up to the ballpark, writing my story, boom, it's online, people read it. Right. And by the next day, you forget it and you move on to the next game. That's how it's supposed to be. But this has been long and slow by design, but it's kind of changed the chemistry of my brain a lot with this job. It means a lot more to me than I thought it would. I did not go into it thinking that it would have that impact on me, and I thought it was a way to write a book. You make $10, maybe $11 if you're lucky. And
I thought you lose money when you write a book.
Yeah, just if I calculated out the daily average, probably, and added in the bar tabs. But it's it's been a gift, but it's been a long process. Wrote it throughout last season while I was covering the team, which in hindsight would not recommend. It's a lot all at once, but then throughout the off season, a long process of editing, cleaning it up, designing, marketing. And then more recently, more of that marketing, which I'm not used to. I prefer to just have my name and a tiny face atop a story, and that's it.
Right.
But this has been a little more involved.
Well, it's more than just an appearance on Toronto Mike. There's a lot of Keegan action, and all the Keegan heads came out yesterday for your book launch. So I did want to reward you with a large frozen lasagna that's in my freezer, and that's courtesy of Palma Pasta. And I'm gonna, you mentioned you want to check out the GLB Brew Pub, so. The next TMLX, which is TMLX 19, is happening very soon. It's June 26th, which is a Thursday night. And that's at the Great Lakes Brewery, which is south of Etobicoke. Keegan, any chance you could make it? Maybe bring your girlfriend, bring anybody you want, because Palma Pasta will feed you your first beers on the house. People want to see you. Could you make TMLX 19 on June 26th?
I hope I can. Let me make sure that I didn't triple, quadruple book myself. But
if you're available, you'll make it.
I've been trying to make these TLMXs. I think the last few, I had a couple last year that ran up against a game, But I want to get in on the fun again. It's been a couple of years since I got to one.
So
and anything at GLB.
Well, here's the thing. So that's the brewery, which is south of Etobicoke. Not to be confused with the brew pub, which is Jarvis and Queens Quay. But I will have an event at the brew pub in like late September, early October. I got to nail down the date. But that would be a great opportunity for you to experience the brew pub with a bunch of great FOTMs. So maybe we'll do like both of these things.
I like it. If it's early October, I might be free. We'll see.
I think you will be. All right. So at your event yesterday, these are the FOTMs I chatted with. You ready? Julia Cruz. Do you know this woman?
I've heard of her. I've heard of that nuisance. Yeah. She's, man, well, I did in studio with her on Jay's Talk Plus the other day, and I've been saying it for a long time that she's one of the most gifted people I've ever met, but I think a lot of other people are figuring that out now. I love it. Well, lest we forget, she came on Toronto Mic'd because she was in your car as you returned from spring training in Dunedin. Absolutely. And then I don't even know if she was ready, but we kind of threw her into the fire and said, you're on the mic now. That was a long time ago now, but she lived with you for a while, right? Yeah, we lived together in a place near Trinity Bellwoods. Moved in before the pandemic, through the pandemic for a couple of years. And we've been tied at the hip. She's right next to me. It's in the press box, stuck to my right every day, and it's I'm very lucky for that. You should have her on here for her own full one. She is. I had a great chat with her yesterday. Goodness, she speaks more languages than I speak words. She is probably the smartest person I know, and she's wasting it on sports. It's terrible, but and she left you for her wife. Is that right? Like, because her wife told me that. Yeah, I officiated their wedding. Right. It was that was my big debut. Wow. One time only. I had some requests after that. Do you do these normally? But I mean, I didn't even know you were accredited. Like, how did you get accredited? Thankfully, I did not have to do the official. Oh, I officiated the ceremony, and I helped with signing of some things. Right. But my dad's a minister, so I channeled the family bloodlines there. I saw your dad yesterday. Yeah. And your mom. Yeah, the family was there. You got a lot of great support there. Yeah, that was wonderful seeing them there. My little sister was up from Nova Scotia. Hey. She's really country. She barely ever leaves our street, let alone our town. So it was really nice having them there. Wow. Okay. Shout out to a few more FOTMs, and I won't spend as much time on all these wonderful people as I did with Julia there. But Ben Nicholson Smith was there, and he's great. He reminded me he biked here when he made his Toronto Mike debut, and I filled up his tire with air. Like, I got all paternal when I saw how soft his tires were. But it was great to see Ben. Gregor Chisholm was there. He's with the Toronto Star now, but you basically took his gig at MLB.com. Am I right with my... That's right. Yeah, it happened at that time. Rich Griffin moved from Star to Blue Jays Communications. Gregor Chisholm from MLB to the Star, and me to MLB. Yeah, and, from Baseball Toronto? Toronto, yeah. And back in the day, Gregor, I was his intern. We had a fancier word for it, but his intern, essentially, in 2017. And you're Maritimers. He's a New Brunswicker. I'll try not to hold it against him. Blake Murphy was there. I love it. So, how do you know Blake? I know how you know him, but how close are you to Blake Murphy? Very. I love Blake. And he is, to be able to do what he does on both Raptors and Blue Jays is ridiculous. And I hope people appreciate how much talent and, my God, how much time that takes for him. By the time I get to an off season, I'm ready to collapse and not talk to anybody for 6 months. I don't think he has one. So another East Coaster as well from Newfoundland, and love Blake. Amazing. Rob Longley was there from the Toronto Sun. Hey, we call him a half Maritimer. His mom's out in Nova Scotia, so he's. We'll give him 51%. You walk amongst us. Like, I need to know, who are these Maritimers? I need to know. Okay, Tim Langton was there. Yeah, absolutely. Of course, he was already there, but he just popped in. Shout out to Tim Langton, PA announcer for the Toronto Blue Jays at the Dome. And Blake Bell was there. Mm-hmm. Blake Bell has been on the program because he came on the mic during one of my live recordings at Christie Pitts. Pause, because I have a book for you. You're going to give me a book, and I'm going to give you a book on the history of Toronto Maple Leafs baseball. Okay. And Keegan, heads up on my YouTube channel, you can see video of me throwing out the first pitch last night. I saw that. That was you saw good form. Some real good form. Nice high leg kick in there. I wanted to do it for real. I was shout out to Blake Bell. I was channeling my inner Dave Steeb. Love it. And we're going to get back to Dave Steeb, but I basically agreed with Blake, and he's got a partner named Len, and they maintain the Today in Dave Steeb history account that I follow on Blue Sky, which is amazing. Twitter, which is amazing. So good. Like, it's not just tweeting, hey, Dave Steve's great. Like, they have so much incredible, like, archival videos, and stories, and newspaper clippings.
Fergie Oliver talking to
cool.
Dave back in 1986 or whatever. We agree. It's an amazing account.
Yeah.
And I told Blake I want him and Len in the basement for a Dave Steve episode, but I'm going to save my Dave Steve talk for later when we get back to your book. So I'm going to just shout out 2 people I met for the first time who agreed that they should visit the basement and become FOTMs, okay? These are the 2 names. Caleb Joseph.
All right.
So we've already texted today. He's, I think in July, he's going to make his debut. And JD Bunkus.
There we go.
So there's a couple of big sports media names.
I love it.
For the Jays heads out there. Okay, so tell me, I was lucky enough to get an advance PDF copy of your book, and I was reading it. But tell me in your words, for those listening, because Father's Day is coming up, and there's always a million good excuses out there if you want to buy a good baseball book for somebody who loves baseball. But what is your book, The Franchise, about? Is it just about the history of Toronto Blue Jays baseball since 77? I played that clip off the top, which was the first pitch in Blue Jays history.
The book covers the whole history of the team, so you're going to touch on every single era, but I had to be picky. So what I landed on was that this is a book about why you give a damn about the Blue Jays, why people care about this team. If I was to write a history book without the word curated, this book would suck. It would be very long. It would probably be 10 books. Nobody would want to read it. There could have been so many wasted chapters of, after this year, they traded this guy for this guy. At a certain point, I had to accept, okay, I can't touch every single thing. I need to be picky. So when I go back to the original years at Exhibition Stadium, what interests me? What 2 or 3 things really interest me? When I think of faces of this franchise, this organization, okay, what 5, 6, 7 people really interest me? Right. And then beyond that, it was a matter of balancing chapters I thought I had to write, because you have to write about Joe Carter, you have to write about Bautista, those great mid-'80s teams, and balancing that with new things. Because if this book was only about the history of the team, well, who cares? Those books have been written, and I wanted to add something. So I hope that at least several of these chapters are new and fresh. That includes Shohei Ohtani. That includes the COVID years. That includes some chapters about players' lives around this city, coming to Canada to play for this team, and some broadcaster chapters. I loved writing about Tom Cheek, Jerry Howarth, chapter on Allison Gordon, which I really enjoyed writing, and then one on Dan Schulman, one on Buck Martinez at the end. The Buck chapter might be my favorite in the whole book, but I wanted things that added to what's out there, because I don't view this book as just like, here it is, it's the book about the Blue Jays. God, no. There have been other books written about this team. There are going to be more books. There have been 2,000 stories a year written about this team, but I want to add to that. And this, I think I landed in the right place with at least the idea. Execution, I'll leave that up to everyone else. But I think in terms of trying to balance it and being a little picky was the right way to do it, instead of stretching it too thin, too shallow.
All right, I have some hard-hitting questions you might not get on Sportsnet.
All right.
But I do want to read a quote from Buck Martinez. He says that your book is a terrific read. That's a direct quote from Buck Martinez.
Direct. I paid these people a lot of money on the back here. Buck was more than kind with his time, but not only for his chapter, but giving me some quotes for the book, reading through it. Buck's amazing.
Could you help me get the legend that is Buck Martinez on Toronto Mic'd?
We got to do it. I'll see if I can grease the wheels.
I would love Shulman's been on a couple of times.
Yeah.
Howarth has been on. I can tell you Buck would love it. And here's the maybe the censure here is that Buck Martinez's son attended my primary school at the same time that I was at this primary school. Shout out to St. Pius X.
I love it.
That's a fact. You can drop that on the Buckster.
He is writing this book, and because Buck and I were friends, we're around each other all the time. But when you write a chapter about someone in a book like this, it gives you an excuse to let it fly a bit more and ask things you normally wouldn't ask. And God, I loved writing that chapter. It's the very last one in the book.
Well, and we're going to hear from Tom Cheek and Jerry Howard throughout this chat, because I actually pulled some choice radio calls. That call off the top was a television call by Don Chevrier from April 7, 1977. I'm going to play another clip from Tom Cheek on that day. But we're going to hear, it'll be nice to hear some Tom and Jerry as we kind of talk, because you curated the content from the history of this team for your book, which I thoroughly enjoyed, but I've curated your curation. But I mentioned a hard-hitting question. Okay, so the hard-hitting question is, how do you strike a balance? Because you mentioned there are the names you have to talk about. Joe Carter, Roy Halladay, Carlos Delgado, Dave Steeb, Cito Gaston. These are names you have to talk about. But there is a name you have to talk about who, let's face it, his name was ripped from the level of excellence at the Dome, and he's persona non gratis at anything to do with Major League Baseball. But how I guess you, like, how was your thought process with regards to possibly, debatably, the greatest position player in the history of the Toronto Blue Jays, two-time World Series champion, Roberto Alomar?
I had to think about that one early in the process in terms of how I'd address Alomar, how I would include him or exclude him. And that was early on when I was still figuring out how do you curate this thing, and that decision process took, it was more of a process of having the confidence to say, okay, I won't include this chapter, I will include this. And I kind of had to hit a point of just, okay, screw it. I'm allowed to. It's my book. I'm allowed to write about Carter, maybe not write about this guy, that guy, that guy.
Sure.
And when I came
That's the curation part.
Yeah, when I came to Alomar, I did include, there's about a page on him right at the front of one of the subsections here. And when you get into, let me remember what my own book is called.
I think he wrote, there's a guy, he wore number 12, he hit a big homer against Eckersley, yada, yada, yada. Let's move on.
Part number 3, Faces of the Blue Jays, just about 100 pages in. At the very beginning of that chapter, the way I framed that was, listen, like these are the people on the level of excellence. There's a guy who used to be there, Roberto Alomar, and this is why he's not.
Although when you say this is why he's not, you don't know, or maybe if you know, you're not publicly, we don't know why he's not. We just know there are people who know and have decided that we would agree. I don't know if I'm wording that properly, but we don't know. We just know he did something that is immoral. Yeah,
there were, and I'm trying to remember the year this happened, was 21, 22. COVID has messed my years. But due to and I'll actually bring open the chapter here just so I can properly quote myself.
Yeah,
here.
Quote yourself.
Where are we here?
And again, we'll move on from Alomar, but, I figure, they're not going to talk about Alomar maybe on a Sportsnet hit or whatever.
No,
but I think it would be ridiculous to pretend like he didn't exist.
2021. And so it was 21, that's right, coming out of COVID. And the Blue Jays announced they were severing all ties. And MLB placed him on the ineligible list. I was trying to remember ineligible or restricted. And he was terminated. Right. Now at that point. They took him off of T12, all of that. Took it away from Rogers Center as well. And those were due to the multiple allegations of sexual misconduct for Robbie Alomar. And MLB had its investigation. I don't know the proper wording if that was in cooperation with the Blue Jays or separately, but had their investigation before that decision was made due to those multiple allegations. And that's after which he was decided to be scrubbed and wiped from Rogers Center. And the decision I came to for the book was that that needed to be said and acknowledged.
Of course.
Why? And beyond that, I decided that, listen, if players bring him up and say Robbie was big to those teams, I would let that quote ride. No problem at all. If players mention him in a sentence, when Robbie and Joe came over in that trade, I'm not going to scrub that. But beyond acknowledging why he was not in the book, I decided not to go further out of the way to tell more of his story. I have written about the decision after those multiple allegations and the decision to terminate him, put him on that restricted list, but chose against giving him a chapter or a larger spot. That's about a page and a half at the just prior to that Dave Steeb chapter when we get into the faces of the franchise. But it's something that had to be acknowledged, something I didn't want to go further on, but you have to acknowledge it. And again, when players, it's sprinkled through, I'm sure, a dozen different spots where players will say, Robbie's home run here, his play here. Let that roll as it was, but otherwise didn't give him any more airtime.
And it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, that in an alternate universe where he doesn't have these allegations against him, there's a big fat chapter on Roberto Alomar. Like, I can see this alternative version in a different galaxy or in a different timeline where, you're celebrating who I believe to be the greatest position player in Blue Jays history.
There would be in a much, much different timeline.
So let's go back. Oh, one more last
Yeah.
Interesting on that note. So we talked about Roberto Alomar. That's the most famous case because, like I said, he's a Hall of Famer and he was on the level of excellence, etc., won the 2 World Series. But the other former Blue Jay who seems to now have been scrubbed, not officially, but I've noticed he's not really celebrated or talked about or invited to any events. And I almost feel like the reasoning for this is so different than the reasoning for Roberto Alomar, as far as I know. But I'm talking about Kelly Gruber.
Gruber, yeah.
Yeah, so Gruber's another key member of the 92 team anyway. And, you know, he had that one monster season. I don't know if it was 1990 or what it was, but it was just a monster season with like 30-plus home runs, 100 RBIs, and batted over 300. Huge season for him at third base. But I'm wondering, like, should we reassess? I feel like this is because he got inebriated and made misogynist comments to a woman hosting the Pitch Talks event.
Yeah, and Gruber, that's another one where I decided he was not to the level of player for a chapter whatsoever for me.
Right.
But when you go back to when he did make a fool of himself with some sexist comments.
Said some stupid shit.
In front of people, which is layers of stupid.
Yeah.
That's disappointing for a player that so many people loved in a different way than you might love Joe Carter or something like that, because I feel like for a lot of folks Gruber was like their guy from that era, and it was disappointing to see how that happened, and certainly no place for that, obviously, when you're dealing with people in public or in private. But Gruber is one that I really notice differently when I speak to people who Gruber is of their era. You know, everyone has that guy who is, maybe they're not the best guy on the team, but they're third, fourth, fifth, and they really have that fan base. The sense I get is that in that era, Gruber was that guy, and that people really, really loved him as a ball player for his style and some of the peaks that he had. But he's another that through the book, I believe is, if you name searched him, maybe mentioned a couple of times as guys brought him up, whether that be in plays or retellings of stories. But I don't think one that I gave any air to myself. No,
I mean, he was never going to make it to the level of excellence. But, man, that was a monster year he had.
He had that one. Goodness.
And he was a part of our 92 Blue Jays. Okay, so the rest of this chat, Keegan, will be less controversial. I feel like we're going to have a celebratory great chat. And I'm going to bring us back to 1977. So off the top, I played the first pitch. Do you know, this is a piece of history I don't think everybody knows. We'll find out now. But do you know what happened to the first batter in Blue Jays history? So you saw Bill Singer pitch to the leadoff batter for the Chicago White Sox. Do you know the result of that at bat?
No, tell me.
So I watched the inning in its entirety, and I actually didn't know what happened to the batter, because we always know the first pitch was a strike. They took the ball, made it to the Hall of Fame, et cetera. But Bill Singer walks that guy. So the first batter for the White Sox takes first base on the walk here. But this happens later in that game.
1 ball, 1 strike. 2 Blue Jays down. Alt gets into one. This one's well hit. Forget about it. It's a home run. That was way back there. First baseman Doug Alt has electrified this crowd at Exhibition Stadium. That one hit between the 375-foot power alley sign and the 400-foot straightaway center field sign. A tremendous shot. And the first ever Blue Jay to hit one out is Doug Alt. So put a star by it and save your scorecard. That, too, will become a collector's item.
That's great audio.
Great audio. And that's Tom Cheek. And I think he was calling the game of Early Win. So this is before Jerry Howarth was with the franchise. You can hear a little early in there. But maybe this is a good chance to, because we will hear a little Tom Cheek and Jerry Howarth throughout. But that first game in 77, I know I'm too young to have watched it. I was a toddler, but you were not even born yet, Keegan.
Not close. Not even an idea yet, no.
How old are you, Keegan Matheson? Is that
I was born in 90, so I was even kind of young to remember the World Series. I can't pretend to have
I can't
memories.
imagine you could remember 92, 93. So this would be like my memory would be that first Jays homer. But Doug Alt would go on to hit 2 home runs in that game, and he has a tragic, sad end to his life, gone too soon, Doug Alt. But maybe a word or two, if you don't mind, about Tom Cheek, the late, great Tom Cheek.
I loved talking to people about Tom Cheek and what he meant to that era. I think there's a special relationship between broadcaster and fans, but especially the first broadcaster, the voice that introduces them to a team. And speaking, especially with Jerry, about the stories he would tell about he and Tom, how different they were, but how much they complemented one another was incredible. And one of my favorite parts of this book was going back through archival Toronto Star or old footage of games, and not just trying to get the retelling, but trying to understand how it felt at the time and what people really felt and thought at the time, instead of revising it 30 years later.
Right.
And it made me an even greater fan and gave me more appreciation of Tom Cheek and what he meant. So to have Jerry be happy with that chapter really meant a lot to me, and that was a special one to talk about that and to listen to some of those old calls. I love that call there.
Tremendous shot.
Great voice.
Great voice. We will hear more Tom Cheek. We're going to hear more Tom Cheek than Jerry Howarth, because I noticed a lot of these big moments were Tom Cheek's calls, because he was the main play-by-play guy. And then Jerry Howarth, when Tom... Well, sadly, we all know another sad end. So there is some sadness in the Toronto Blue Jays history as we talk it through here. And Tom Cheek gone far, far too soon, and he's missed by every Blue Jay fan. That's without a doubt. So Keegan, I've read the book, and we're gonna at the end we'll get to Shohei Ohtani, because I need to spend a little time on that. But could we spend a little time talking about the gentleman? In fact, as we set it up, I'm actually going to play it. I'm out of order now, but that's okay. I'm going to play a little more Tom Cheek. Here you go.
1 ball, 1 strike to Brown. The pitch, a swing, and a fly ball right field. Junior Felix is there. He's done it. He's done it. Dave Stieb has his no-hitter. Dave Stieb has his no-hitter, finally. He has done it here in Cleveland. He is being mobbed by his teammates. Dave Stieb has pitched the first no-hitter in Blue Jays history.
And we're still waiting for the second, but that's David Andrew Stieb. Could you please chat with me a little bit about a man I believe 100% belongs in Cooperstown? He should be in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
That call is from 4 days before I was born.
Wow.
And I am not a young man for people watching the video of this. That's how long it's been. It's my whole lifetime since a no-hitter. And there's something mythical about no-hitters, especially in Toronto. And Dave Stieb fascinates me more than any baseball player who has ever played in this city. Dave Stieb fascinates me because not only was he great, he often seemed like he was battling with greatness and battling in some way with the attention that came with it. And I was so fascinated reading back through old magazine stories, newspaper stories about Stieb. Not only how he was talked about, but how he would talk about himself. Like there are some Stieb quotes from back in the 80s that I dug up to include in this. They're incredible. And that paints the picture of someone who was trying to wrestle with his relationship with fame and the sport. And you, of course, along the way, get a lot of teammates saying, like, man, he never screwed up. It was always us. He had the evil eye. Most of them also said he softened with time, and it's a different thing. But I wish that we had a big chance to revisit the Stieb Hall of Fame conversation. I mean, like in a formal way where a Veterans Committee with the Hall of Fame is considered. How
do we do this? I have a question, because this came up yesterday at your event when I was chatting with Blake Bell, and we talked about, speaking of, tragic sadness or whatever, but we talked about how Tim Raines had a champion and how this spread or whatever.
Yep.
And I'm legit curious, because I'm going to do everything within my tiny little power. Okay, I'm going to do my part. But how do we get this? What's the official process for getting Dave Stieb in the Hall of Fame?
So it would be through one of they're called era committees with the Hall of Fame. And it rotates through a few different eras. So I'd have to check when the Stieb era would be coming back around. But we've seen this, Fred McGriff, I believe, was through one of those committees. But we've seen this come back around a couple of times. And it would need to be discussed in one of those. I believe Cito Gaston was part of a more recent one as well. Once again, did not get enough consideration. But Dave Stieb, there's so many factors that go into this. And some of them sound like Toronto excuses, but I don't believe they are. It's if Dave Stieb had have played in the era of 3 wild cards, we're having a different conversation, because then he wins 20 playoff games and dominates on the big stage when everyone in New York and LA are watching. And he also came up on some crappy teams. This is going through 79 into 80, 81, 82. They weren't quite yet the mighty mid-80s Blue Jays.
No.
So that was a factor as well. And if Stieb had had a bigger stage, if he had pitched on some good teams right out of the blocks, because back then wins mattered more. We were not looking at his horizontal break on his slider or whatever stuff we pretend to know to sound smart these days.
Right.
You looked at wins and innings and maybe a little bit of strikeouts. But Steve is he's a modern pitcher. I think he could pitch today. And I loved talking to the pitchers who caught him most, speaking to Ernie Witt about him, speaking to Buck about him.
Yeah.
The moment I said Dave Steeb's name to Buck Martinez, he cut me off and he said, best pitcher the Blue Jays ever had. And this is a franchise that's had Roy Halladay and some great pitchers.
But I would say that contest is between two people.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, I don't think if you got 100 baseball fans and said best starter in best pitcher in Blue Jay history, it's going to be a debate between Roy Halladay and Dave Steeb.
Totally.
So I get that. I gotta point one more thing out. Maybe this is the effect of me co-hosting a show with Mark Hebscher for 5 years. Okay. I miss Hebsy on sports. I'm just throwing that into the universe. Shout out to Hebsy. But when I talked to people who covered baseball, and I talked to a lot of them, Larry Milson and Dave Perkins, I talked to all these people who covered Blue Jay baseball in the 80s, and to a T, they all will tell you that Dave Steeb was not an easy guy to get along with. Like, he wasn't media friendly, and the reporters like Hebsy had very difficult times with him, where he may even be like a bit of an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
That, I believe, has worked against him in his pursuit of Cooperstown.
Absolutely. I have a lot of issues with Hall of Fame voting, to the point where in a few years I'll get a Hall of Fame vote. I don't know how I feel about that. It's something I'm actually going to need to think about. And I have an even bigger problem with this weird phenomenon where it turns into a grandstanding couple of weeks of, here's my story on my ballot. I'm like, okay, are we trying to do the best possible job here, or are we all trying to have a moment in the sun? I don't like it, how it works. I also don't have a better solution, which I should, but it's flawed. And the human element does come into that. I think we saw that with Carlos Delgado as well. But with Steve, when you have a rep for being bad with writers, it's hard to recover from that. That does tilt some coverage. That does especially get around. When writers, all we do is sit around and chat with each other and gossip. There's lots of time. Word gets around if you're an asshole. And for Steve especially, there's a lot of different ways to be an asshole or have some edge about you. It's looking back, guys like Jose Bautista, he had all the edge in the world. He's all edges. Sure. But his was more of a swagger than he had. And every once in a while, he knew when to wink at the camera. He wasn't a dick. And your first evidence is that he sat down with me last June and chatted me up on my little podcast. So and he had that swagger and the feel for it. So many of the stories I hear about Steve are a little further in the other direction, where it was abrasive. That will get around. That will hurt your chances. And it's a human voted process, which by its very nature is flawed. Right. I also want to shout out another great Blue Jay reporter from back in the day who's been down here to tell me many a story, but I got to shout out Bob Elliott from the Toronto Sun. Got to make sure I do that. Hey, so I know you've seen the Captain Ahab, John Boyce. Amazing. It's amazing. So, as much as we're pushing the wonderful Blue Sky account, and I think it's also on X, although I haven't been on X in a long time. But the this day in Dave Steeb history, we promote that, but we also find the John Boyce, and that's how you say his last name, right? Boyce? I've only ever read it. I believe so, yeah. I've only ever read it, okay. I never know if that S is silent, but okay. Find it. And here's a little fun fact from it. Okay, so Dave Steeb, as you know, Keegan Matheson, from history books, because you were very young, or unborn, I should say. Dave Steeb lost 2 no-hitters in 2 consecutive starts, and both times the Blue Jays were 2 outs, and there was 2 outs and 2 strikes in the 9th. So that's 8.2 innings of no-hitter by Dave Steeb, and he's got 2 strikes on the batter. This happened 2 consecutive starts. Obviously, both times he lost the no-no. There was that one bad bounce, and what a time. I'm so glad Dave Steeb finally got his no-hitter. But according to John Boyce in this wonderful YouTube documentary I highly endorse, the mathematical odds of that happening, 2 starts in a row going, 8.2 innings and having 2 strikes on the batter, 1 in 241 million. Amazing. So just take that in for a minute.
Because I had a blood clot in my brain, Keegan, and it was like they said 1 in a million, and I was thinking, oh my God, like it's like winning the wrong lottery. This is quite something. 1 in 241 million.
It's all part of the legend, that he was tortured before this all happened. It's why everyone's still chasing him. It's I wrote
mythical,
the
right?
Bowden
It's like,
Francis story twice last year. He almost made it to Dave Stieb, but
right.
It's so many organizations now have 6 or 8 or 10 or 20 no hitters, and it seems like we're seeing them fairly regularly in baseball.
But now now what I dislike as a fan from the 80s and 90s is this 5 of us combined on the no hitter. Like I miss the good old days.
Yeah.
The starter finishes his no hitter.
More rare.
Doesn't happen so much. I do want to shout out, we talked about Roy Halladay for a moment, but I do want to shout out the game I attended. It was the last game of the season, and I was there, and I witnessed Roy Halladay take a no 8.2 innings. So he had 2 outs in the 9th of a no against the Tigers. And I was there, and I remember telling my buddy, I said, oh my God, I'm going to witness a no-hitter.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I'm going to witness this. It's going to be the second no-hitter in Blue Jay history. Bobby Higginson takes Halladay deep.
Yeah.
And you know this, but who do you think ends up with that ball in their glove in the bullpen? Who do you think?
Oh, who was it? I actually... I've read this. I know this somewhere.
You knew it. I'm going to remind you. You ready?
Yeah.
His name is Dave Stieb.
Oh, that's right. That's the legend. Yeah.
This is fact. I've seen the video evidence.
Yeah.
So Dave Stieb in the bullpen because he came back as a reliever. He's in the bullpen.
Which for me is one of the most interesting stories in Jay's history.
Well, this is, we talk about, I actually joked, we have a not so secret WhatsApp group for FOTMs, and I said, okay, Keegan Matheson is coming over. We're going to talk about Dave Stieb for 90 minutes. And my tongue was in my cheek, but I honestly could do it, but I'm going to save it for Blake and Len when they come over. But the fact that he's drafted as an outfielder. Like, if you think about the fact Dave Stieb wasn't this pitching phenom, he was an outfielder who was converted to pitcher, and in a very short period of time becomes the ace of the Blue Jays. Like, everything is unbelievable. And then you know how he comes back as a reliever.
The comeback's amazing.
Yeah.
I talked to a lot of guys about that. I think it was Pat Henkin I talked to about that. And the stories in the book, it's a little fried in my mind, but I think Steve maybe used his cleats that day or something, but they were just, they saw him in spring training, and he was sawing guys off, and he couldn't throw it straight anymore. And one day, Steve just kind of grumbled to them. He's like, all right, I'm going to go throw a bullpen. And these guys, and that's when Roger Clemens was around too, and it's just, what a story, man. Like, after that many years away, we won't see something like that again, period.
So the Dave Stieb story, it's unbelievable. I can't believe we got to witness that, and my objective, maybe it's my calling in this life, is to do whatever I can to amplify this messaging to the right people and get Dave Stieb in Cooperstown.
I like it.
Okay, so again, jumping around, because, hey, that's how we roll. But I would be remiss if I didn't play a certain call from the aforementioned legend, Tom Cheek.
He works to Hasse. There's a swing and a fly ball left field. Bell is there. He's got it. The Blue Jays have done it. They have won the East. They have won the East. George Bell catching the ball and dropping to his knees. A mob scene out around second base as Doyle Alexander is mobbed by his teammates. Here come the outfielders in. They will be met by their mates and this mammoth crowd that has come streaming down out of the seats now. Somebody takes George Bell's cap. He wants it back. He takes it back. And the Blue Jays and Doyle Alexander are going to be ushered off the field by their adoring public. Alexander with his cap off, being carried by the throng down there on the field.
So there you go. The drive of 85. Again, I've got 15 years on you, Keegan. I loved the 85 Blue Jays.
Yeah. Those rosters back then, I wish there were more wild card spots. I wish it was the modern MLB structure. And if I could rewrite Blue Jays history, those were a handful of the all-time great teams, top 5 Blue Jays teams of all time. And it was just so damn hard to get to the World Series back then. But
it meant something. I feel like I'm with you. Right, I'm with you. Then at the same time, I'm like, now you had to win the AL East.
Yeah, you can, because now when I hear teams talking about just trying to get into the playoffs, no, shut up, win the division. Try to win the division, Right. And I feel like that's accepted too much around Toronto. Oh, golly, the third wild card spot again. Come on. Half the league gets in. So I see
it's
it from both
becoming like
sides.
a NHL now.
Yeah,
It's
and I don't know where I
regular.
land on it, but I just wish that back then there had been more space. Back like prime Dave Stieb pitching in like a clinching game. Come on, man.
Sure, but in '85, didn't he get the start in Game 7 against the Kansas City Royals, right? And again, I don't want to remind people of is it Jim Sundberg and his bases loaded triple. Shout out to Al Oliver, though, Scoop, because he was a former Expo. And I said the word Expo, so I just want to tell you that on the live stream, live.torontomike.com, a bunch of people tuned in to witness this moment in time of the recording of this episode of Toronto Mike. I just want to shout out Moose Grumpy, who loves that in your book you recognize the broadcasters too. Like it's not just about the players.
Yeah.
So she appreciates that. But I want to just point out that Leslie Taylor is on the live stream. She says the Ohtani story was bonkers. So I think we'll close with the Ohtani story, actually.
All right.
But Leslie's dad, well before our time, but Leslie's dad was Russ Taylor with the Expos. And when I had Jim Van Horn on this program, Toronto Mic'd, one of the big reasons why Tom Cheek ended up in Toronto for the 77 season is a recommendation from Russ Taylor and Tom Cheek's experience with the Expos. Russ Taylor would be calling Expos game with Dave Van Horn.
I love it.
I said Dave, right? Because sometimes when I'm saying in my head, did I say Jim Van Horn?
I think you might have. Yeah.
Okay, you know what?
Yeah, I think I was jumbling them myself. I was trying to do the math here, but
Jim Van Horn's a fake name.
yeah.
Dave Van Horn's a real name. Okay, but Jim Van Horn is not a Jim Van Horn. Although shout out to FOTM Jim Van Horn. But Dave Van Horn is who I hope I'm speaking about from the Expos and his experience of Tom Cheek. And Dave Van Horn, helpful getting Tom Cheek that Blue Jays job.
I love it.
But I want to shout out Russ Taylor from the Expos, who definitely belongs in the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame, along with Rob Butler from Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
He's the coach of that team right now. So I'm sure I got most of those facts right. If not, Leslie's on the live stream and can correct me because sometimes I get it 80% right. But okay, so 85, Jays finally win the pennant. Could you just spend a moment chatting with me about that outfield? Because I have an old Shoppers Drug Mart calendar hanging on the wall over here, and I've kept it frozen. This is, I think, 1986's calendar, but I've got it frozen on May because that was George Bell's month in this calendar, and I love George Bell. But can we spend a moment talking about that outfield of Lloyd Moseby, Jesse Barfield, and George Bell?
Amazing. And I'm just pulling up their stats because I want to see all of their stats from that specific season too.
Which one, 85?
And from 85, because I'm pulling these guys up. But looking at their complementing styles of play as well. Like you had the incredible speed in Moseby. You had the incredible power. I loved last night at the book launch. I had so many people because I had some stacks of baseball cards there just to give out as bookmarks.
Right.
And so many people were all over the Jesse Barfields. Like he had the super fans out.
Well, he had that cannon for an arm, and people remember in right field he would throw a strike.
But yeah, that's even the season that I was curious. Moseby had 18 home runs himself. Barfield 27, Bell 28. But I was looking for the steals that season. Yeah, all over 20 steals. Moseby had 37 that year. I was looking for the speed between all of them. Like such incredible athletes, and coming up together like a young outfield like that is the dream. And
all the same age almost.
Yeah, and the Blue Jays, I mean, they haven't developed an outfielder in forever. It's a weird weakness of this organization now.
Was it Vernon Wells? Shannon Stewart?
Kind of, yeah, Vernon Wells. But they've developed a lot of guys who have come up and kind of been around. But in terms of like a face, it's been infielders, But that outfield is wild to me. So much just raw talent in that outfield. And at those ages, they're all hitting their prime at the exact same time, going through their mid-20s. Another thing I just wish they had have gotten a couple more cracks together because what a group.
What a group. And the final game at Exhibition Stadium, we didn't call it a walk-off back then. We didn't have this nomenclature, but George Bell ended it with a home run. And I recorded that game to VHS. And I still, not that I could play it, but I have the VHS cassette around the corner. But here's another moment from George Bell.
Hi, I'm George Bell. You listen to Toronto Mike.
So there you go.
Nice.
Number 11 here. And a shorter amount of time. So that's sort of like, that's a big time for young Mike. And I think a lot of people my age, that drive of 85, we had a 3-1 lead in the ALCS against the, I won't talk about what happened. I mentioned the Jim Sundberg thing. But if we're going to talk about heartbreak, I just want to spend a moment because FOTM Gare Joyce made a tremendous audio documentary entitled The Fall of 87. And because it was deleted by Rogers and was no longer in their podcast feed, I basically just went rogue and said, I'm dropping it in my feed because I want to share this. It's so good. I just went rogue. Don't tell they're not listening, right?
No, never.
Rogers, it wasn't me. I'm like Shaggy over here. But a moment, though, on what I think, again, speaking to fellow Gen Xers who love the Blue Jays, that 87 collapse, I'm still kind of haunted by it.
That's the one that makes people cringe if you were fans of that era. That's like the team you do not mention. You know, and I don't think this current era of Jays fans has something that close. So for a lot of folks, it's kind of 2021, that great team that just missed. There's some heartbreaking playoff losses, but that was extravagant. That stretch, then with Tony Fernandez and what happened.
Ernie Witt, Buck Martinez. Who went down? Was it Ernie Witt or Buck Martinez? I know Tony went down.
Yeah.
With that hard slide of Bill Madlock, I think it was, at second base. But one of our catchers went down, and I'm thinking it was Ernie Witt.
Right. And then even I knew the Coles notes of the story. This is how many losses down the stretch. The Tigers did this. But even how they went into that, they were hot going into that.
Yeah.
That's what surprised me. They had a big winning streak going into that final, and then it all fell apart. They weren't kind of just hovering around. They were red hot.
And my favorite player of all time, who would win the MVP that year, went completely cold for that final, 7 games. Like, George Bell stopped hitting.
Kills you. And I look at the games through there. There's a couple of guys. I was looking through their splits for that last week of the season. It just all went wrong. And it was a team that didn't really have those red flags or warning signs. Like, it was a powerhouse. And the winning streak they had running into that last stretch, I feel like, is what made it so heartbreaking. And that's the one where, to this day, I've had a few people mention that chapter of 87 with George Bell. And the kind of sense of like, hey, great chapter, I hated it. It's one that folks do not want to be reminded of, I feel.
I think what happened 5 years later does a lot to kind of it's like sort of like the Buckner error at first base is easier to deal with when you've won a couple since then. But so fall of 87, but now a couple of names. One is Cito Gaston. I have been told by the owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs that I will get a sit down with Cito Gaston this summer. So I haven't locked it in, but Cito is going to be like an ambassador for Toronto Maple Leafs baseball, as is Snow, by the way. Snow is an official ambassador of Toronto Maple Leafs baseball. Did you know that, Keegan Matheson?
I did not. I'm learning a lot today.
You're learning a lot. If you come to TMLX 19 on June 26th, you can hang with the Snowman.
My God.
Like, you spend a moment in his orbit. It's unbelievable. Okay.
Amazing.
You think the Ohtani chapter is good. Holy smokes here. But maybe a moment on Cito and how he was able to get the most out of his players so we would win back-to-back World Series titles in 92, 93.
I think outside of Toronto, Cito is completely miscast as a guy that just got a bunch of All-Stars and won some championships. And every player you talk to is almost pissed off about that. They'll go so far out of their way to tell you, like, no, this guy mattered. And somehow, some way, I don't think that we talk about Cito Gaston enough in Toronto. And people who were around for those teams do, but I'm talking about younger fans, the new generation of fans, even the job that the organization itself does to keep history alive. I think there needs to be more Cito Gaston. And there is an art form to knowing when to insert yourself and when to stay the hell out of the way. John Gibbons got very good at this later in his career with the Blue Jays. Those were clubhouses full of personalities. And when we look back on 92 and 93, we tend to look at championship teams in a very sunny light because they won, they're champions, everyone's happy and dancing.
Sure.
But those teams had some big personalities that were hard to manage. And Cito Gaston, like John Gibbons later and like many great veteran managers, knew when to take a peek in the clubhouse and just walk away, and knew when to say, shut the hell up, I'm talking. And that's an incredibly difficult thing to do because if you take the wrong step in doing that, you lose a clubhouse. It's a very hard thing to keep control of. And every single player, I don't care if I'm talking to the 26th guy on the roster or Joe Carter or Dwayne Ward, Tom Henke, in the big moments, the starters, everyone says the same thing, which is that he just let you do your thing. He left you alone. He trusted you. And Cito's quote that I always held on to was that I think he said, I'll lose one game now to win 3 down the road. And eventually he won those 3 down the road. He did it a couple times. Right. And that's going to take leaving in a closer who's shaky once or twice. You might lose that game. But in the big moment later in the year, that closer is not going to be looking over their shoulder, nervous. They know that their guy is going to trust them.
These are great points. And to bring us up to speed, because I want to talk about, it's in your book, it's illustrated quite well in your book, but the turnover from the 92 to the 93 team. I think we sometimes think of that core. Oh, yeah, Olerud's there and Carter's there and Alamar's there, and we talk about this core. Devo's there, but there's a shocking amount of turnover from 92 to 93. So going back to back, quite something. But on our way there, back to the late, great Tom Cheek.
The pitch to Sprague. It's a drive. It's deep left field. It's way back. It's gone. Home run, Ed Sprague on the first pitch that he sees from Jeff Reardon. And this game has been turned right around as the Blue Jays will take the lead. Sprague hitting the plate, and the Blue Jays lead it 5-4 in Atlanta. Ed Sprague coming off the bench to pull the trigger on the first offering from Jeff Reardon, and he goes deep over the left field wall.
Are Blue Jays fans appreciative enough of the home run from Ed Sprague in 92 in Atlanta?
Oh, that one needs to be talked about a lot more. Especially, again, I bring it back to the younger generation of fans, and I don't mean that to crap on them at all. I just think that this organization at times has done a strange job of keeping its own history alive. And the Sprague home run, everyone knows Bautista and Carter, but the Sprague home run going into that, the Winfield double, like some of these massive moments that maybe don't have as much footing as they should. And I love talking to Ed Sprague about that. He's, at least last year, was working with the A's, I believe still is. But I'm fascinated by that, and similar in the Joe Carter moment, like just how one play can define someone's career and their life. Like Carter's the extreme. He can't get out of bed without being asked about that. But Sprague, I knew it was the millionth time he'd told the story, but you can tell it still meant so much to him. And he's another guy who said he owes his whole career to Cito Gaston and moments like that. But it was also fascinating to hear how much different baseball works today versus back then. And he said, listen, I just got with a couple guys in the dugout, and I think the conversations were just like, is it high or low? Is it a fastball? Is it a heater? What's this guy like? There's no iPad. There's no charts. I was going to say,
no iPad made an appearance.
It was just a quick chat with a veteran in the dugout, and boom, go up and be a baseball player. And there's probably should be room for a bit more of that. But, man, what a moment.
What a moment. And it kind of, for a casual Jays fan, Ed Sprague wasn't really on the radar because Kelly Gruber was your third baseman, right? So it's an interesting passing of the torch sort of situation there. But you mentioned the Dave Winfield double and what a hit that was. And I didn't pull the double, but I pulled this.
Otis Nixon grounded out to short in the first, grounded out to short in the third, popped up to short in the fifth, base hits in the seventh and the ninth. Waggles the bat and he waits. Timlin to the belt. Pitch on the way, and there's a bunted ball. First base side, Timlin to Carter, and the Blue Jays win it. The Blue Jays win it. The Blue Jays are World Series champions. They come pouring out of the dugout, and they are mobbing Carter, and they go down in one big collective heap over by the first base bag here. A big pile up. Somebody on the bottom might be hurt in all of that. The Blue Jays have won the World Series.
For some reason, I always loved the one big collective heap. That was always one of my favorite lines.
He was so good at just describing what he saw, and this will play in a moment when I, touch them all, Joe. It's like, make sure you touch those bags, Joe Carter. But wow, there it is, 92 World Series champs, that moment, Timlin to Carter. And so many thoughts. One is that, can you imagine John Olerud at first where he would normally be? Like, I feel like Joe being there, you get the leap. Like, Joe was so exuberant, where John Olerud was so low-key. But there's another name I feel is not talked about enough, John Olerud. Because these big personalities and these great players are surrounding him, you almost don't have oxygen to talk about the sweetest swing I've ever seen.
One of the best, like, just pure hitters in the history of this team. And what fascinates me about Olerud, and I'm a big baseball card collector, and I collect a lot of Olerud, and I love collecting old rookie cards of his where he's listed as a first baseman and a pitcher. Because coming out of college, he was like original Ohtani. He used to be a pitcher and played both ways in college ball, and had some legit talent at it. Like, could strike guys out. He wasn't just eating innings. So I love. Similarly, I love collecting Carlos Delgado catcher cards.
Right.
But any cards that list Olerud as a pitcher as well, I'm obsessed with, because I loved him as a hitter. I wish he played for 1,000 years. Like, he's one of my all-time favorite baseball players. And man, like, what a player. That run at 400 this season he had was one of the coolest all-time seasons in this organization. I love John Olerud.
Okay, so as we make our way to 93 here, I'm now reminded of that great story John Olerud tells about playing, I guess, with Ricky Henderson, where Ricky didn't remember playing with John Olerud. Do you remember this story?
Oh, no.
Like, okay, so it's like, do I know you or something? And I think John's like, yeah, we played together in World Series 93 for the Blue Jays, but I think this was with the Mets or something. But Ricky Henderson, there's another name. I can't believe he's gone.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. Ricky Henderson no longer with us. That's just gone far too soon here. Okay, so I'm going to tie up some loose ends, and I'm going to shout out a couple of sponsors, and then I got to tell people, if you care anything about baseball or Blue Jays baseball, the franchise, A Curated History of the Blue Jays by Keegan Matheson. You mentioned Gibby earlier. How'd you get him to write the foreword?
He was great. At first, he told me just to write it myself and make it sound good, but I eventually got him going on it. But Gibby was great to me for the book. I loved writing the chapter about him. He was great on some other chapters, especially Josh Donaldson, kind of lovingly giving him some crap. But hearing players talk about John Gibbons was one of the more meaningful things about writing this book. It's just like Russell Martin had my favorite quote in the whole book. He said, "He feels like home." I just thought it was the most amazing thing I'd ever heard said about a manager. And Gibby was great, though. He's only getting more Gibby by the years, and he was really generous for that. So I loved the foreword. It was an honor to have that from him.
Amazing. I mentioned I had to mop up a little loose ends here. So Chris Cooksey did write in when Chris Cooksey heard that you were coming back to Toronto. Mike, the question, and I don't know if you have the answer, but he says, and I think we all know the answer, but why did Manny Lee switch to Manuel? He went downhill after that. This is the Chris Cooksey take.
Yeah.
So it reminds me of Albert Bell, Joey Bell. He was Joey Bell, Albert Bell. Yeah. But yeah, Manny wanted to be Manuel. That's his right.
It's another one. I like collecting Jorge Bell before George Bell baseball cards. I love collecting the Jorges. But man, I like it. We got to get to the bottom of it. This is the analytics I'm more interested in. Okay. I like it.
These names, these are back when the middle infielders didn't have to hit for any power whatsoever,
no.
right?
Nope.
I feel Cal Ripken changed all that, but Manny Lee, Nelson Liriano, just maybe a little line drive single, please. That's all we ask of you. So again, a couple quick hits. We do need to shout out Pat Gillick, and you mentioned it earlier, but the Joe Carter, Robbie Alomar trade for, is it Fred McGriff and Tony Fernandez, right? Like, wow.
Amazing. I always try to come up with the modern equivalents of that, and I don't think there ever will be one to that level, given how big money has gotten in the sport now, and anyone of that stature now or close to that stature would already be on an 8 or 10 year deal. I just don't think that's going to happen again. And like a big leaguer for big leaguer, star for star trade, it just doesn't happen. It's got to be big leaguers for prospects or for money or something, but that's just, an all-timer. I think that will just forever be the biggest trade in Jays history. I don't think anything's going to touch it.
I can't imagine. The only other bigger trade, but it was a lopsided trade, whereas, you're getting Fred McGriff and Tony Fernandez. Fred McGriff, future Hall of Famer, but the Gilmore trade was a monster. I think it was like 10 players involved, and it gets Gilmore in Toronto, and Gilmore, there's Wendell over there. Gilmore's in the washroom. Not literally, okay? He's just hanging on the wall over there. Okay. I do want to just say shout out to Exhibition Stadium. You're too young, but I experienced all my first Blue Jays action at the what they lovingly called the Mistake by the Lake, and I never knew any better. So as far as I was concerned this is where my Blue Jays play, and I love the place.
I love it.
Loved it. Okay. And here's the call. I have a contractual obligation to play this.
Joe has had his moments. trying to lay off that ball, low to the outside part of the plate, and he just went after one. 2 balls and 2 strikes on him. Here's the pitch on the way, a swing and a belt, left field, way back, Blue Jays win it! The Blue Jays are World Series champions as Joe Carter hits a 3-run home run in the 9th inning, and the Blue Jays have repeated as World Series champions. Touch 'em all, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life.
Wow. Okay, that happened, Keegan. That happened, okay? So specific questions for you, author of the wonderful book, The Franchise, A Curated History of the Jays. How important was Ricky Henderson being on second base during that at-bat?
We've asked Joe Carter about that before, and he gave this great quote that Ricky was the annoying like mosquito out there going bzzz and just getting in everyone's head. And he was always a big believer that pitchers were very conscious of that.
Well, Mitch Williams seemed to be well aware the greatest base stealer in the history of the game was on second base.
You have to be. So it sure as hell is not going to get you a worse pitch. And Joe Carter said a lot of different times, I've heard him talk about Ricky there, how important that was. And Joe Carter still amazes me to this day, man. He has not gotten tired of talking about that. That's kind of some of what the chapter is about. Just a moment like that can crush somebody. Like it can swallow your entire life and boil you down to one moment. Like there are many stories of these great players who have these big, great moments, and it kind of drives them nuts, like winning the lottery or something. It sounds great, but a lot of them go crazy. So Joe Carter's embraced it, and I think it's really incredible how he has. And I've seen him at 100 different galas and alumni events, and he nails it, man. He treats every single person like it's the first time he's been asked about it.
Okay, well, I'll just tell you my experience, which is last June I had Joe Carter on Toronto Mike for the first time.
Nice.
So he's sitting where you are. Well, not in this basement. It was at the Joe Carter Classic, but we're sitting a couple of feet away from each other. And I play that very clip I just played, and he does this look. I wish I had a camera on him, but he mouths it like he lip syncs the thing, and he does this kind of eye roll, like, okay, here I go for the 1,000th time. Yeah. But he's very gracious, to happy to talk about it, and I think if you're known for hitting a walk-off homer to clinch a World Series, there are worse things to be known for. So, yeah. So now is our opportunity here, before I give you a couple more gifts here, this is our opportunity to talk about the turnover between the 92 World Series champion Blue Jays and the 93 World Series champions, because there is a core that's intact, but there's a lot of change on that roster.
It's almost half the roster. It's crazy, and I don't think that's enough of the story often enough. The amount of moves that went into that, and some of them were necessary just based on contracts, but some of it was very proactive and very bold at the time. And going back through newspaper archives and stuff, reading, like, not everyone loved them at the time. A lot of it was like, whoa, really? You're taking this and doing this to the world championship team? But that's what a great front office does. They are strong in their beliefs, and that front office certainly was. And they said, listen, like, we need to do this before something goes wrong, or before we have to. We want to do it when we want to do it, not when we have to do it. And I'm so impressed by that. I think that's always going to be the model in Toronto. And the sheer number of players who were turned over and how they reshaped the top half of that lineup too, which was really exciting. But man, the
when it goes from Whamco to Ham Cow,
that is a hell of a lineup, man. Incredible,
unbelievable. And a couple of other key changes, of course. Dave Winfield out. Paul Mahler in. That's quite that. I mean, there's a significant change right there. And of course, we talked about Ed Sprague earlier, but like third base is now Ed Sprague's domain, and also the Tom Henke. Terminator Tom Henke. Now it's Dwayne Ward as your closer, and you don't miss a beat.
Amazing. I love looking back at Dwayne Ward's seasons. A reliever throwing almost 100 innings. Dwayne Ward's another guy that could be dropped into 2025 and still succeed. He was a modern reliever.
And all these unsung heroes that we're rediscovering. Now, speaking of unsung heroes, I got to shout out Al Grego, who's going to be playing live, not this Saturday, but I think next Saturday for his 50th birthday. He and his band, the Royal Pains, are going to play live. But he's not just a great singer. He's also the host of Yes, We Are Open, which is an award-winning podcast from Moneris, and the season 8 finale just dropped. And if you haven't listened yet to the Season 8 finale of Yes, We Are Open, you're missing out on one of the sweetest episodes featuring Brenda and Rick Coletta, owners of The Parlor and the Fry's The Limit in Thornton, Ontario. So subscribe and listen, Keegan Matheson.
I will. I'm there. I'm in.
You're in. Okay, well, here's a measuring tape for you, courtesy of Ridley Funeral Home.
Thank you.
They got a great podcast called Life's Undertaking.
I like it.
That you should subscribe to. And speaking of great podcasts, Building Toronto Skyline, we're recording a couple of new episodes next Friday, but Nick Iones is the host of that show. I get to co-host, and Nick has stepped up to help fuel the real talk over here. And last but not least, if anyone listening, or you, Keegan, have old cables, old electronics, old devices, don't throw it in the garbage because those chemicals end up in our landfill. Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca, put in your postal code, find out where you can drop it off to be properly recycled. Is that a good idea, Keegan?
Absolutely. Please save the environment with us.
Roy Halladay.
Yeah.
And I remember in real time thinking, I think he is as good as Dave Stieb. And I remember having a moment near the end of his Blue Jay career when I decided maybe he's even better than Dave Stieb. So it's impossible to really compare these two greats. But Roy Halladay, regardless, hell of a pitcher and a Hall of Famer.
Amazing. And hearing old teammates talk about him fascinated me. I talked to Ricky Romero a lot about him, and I leaned a lot on those for the stories. Ricky coming up as kind of the fresh rookie, maybe the next big thing, right. And Roy as the established great pitcher in Toronto. And Ricky was fantastic for the book and said that, like his version of it was like, listen, like early on I was a little nervous, but then he caught himself and was like, dude, like I'm from East LA. Like I can go up to this guy. This is not scary. This is Roy Halladay. And the relationship that they built was so incredible. But the Roy Halladay's story, I mean, unfortunate and as tragic.
More tragedy. As we talk, I realize there's a lot of tragedy.
More and more. There's something in this org. But and again, another example of a guy who I wish was pitching on better teams. Again and again, we keep coming back to this. Right. But
and with better logos.
Yeah. And I really grew up on Roy Halladay. Like I was an Elgato and a Holiday guy. And every fifth day there was Roy Halladay. And the absolute model of consistency and of greatness in Toronto. And this gets brought up a lot, but the true sign of how respected and liked he was that when he requested the trade and was eventually dealt, there wasn't a huge uproar. There was some people upset, certainly, but a lot of folks are saying, okay, like, you know what? You've given enough. Like, go get a World Series. And I'm so glad he had those moments with the Phillies and the perfect one. And it's just an incredible, incredible career. I wish he was still around coaching ball and working with young pitchers and being way too intense in a bullpen somewhere. But
I remember the stories, Bob Elliott, et cetera, would report on the fact that he was like up at 5 a.m. work. He'd be first to the park to do his workout and everything. Like his commitment to fitness, for example, and to his craft, second to none.
Unlike anyone. And the very rigid robotic routines he would go through every day. Pitchers, position players who were with him still tell those stories of how dedicated he was to an extent that it was difficult for people to keep up even when they tried.
Wow. So Roy Halladay, I mentioned, had many great years of the Jays with that awful logo I never liked. But Carlos Delgado also had the unfortunate circumstance to have to wear that logo that Toronto Mike did not like. But you mentioned Carlos. You had Roy Halladay and Carlos Delgado. Yeah. And is this another former Blue Jay who belongs in Cooperstown?
Yes, and he's tainted by the steroid era. He had no connection, none whatsoever. But that entire era, even if it's not the steroid talk, it's the fact that all those numbers were jacked up around you. And that limits not just your candidacy, but your year-to-year All-Star games, Silver Slugger, stuff like that. A few other factors with that. If he had maybe gotten one more year in the big leagues before that hip injury really hurt him, you'd get that 500 home run plateau. That changes everything. Right. 500 homers. And on top of all of that, I wrote a bit in the book about this, but Delgado was also politically outspoken as well. And in a very thoughtful, intelligent way, I think. He is, to this day, such a fascinating interview because he's so well-spoken. But that also rubbed some American writers wrong.
100%.
And
he wouldn't stand for the American, the Star Spangled
And that was
Banner.
a big issue.
Because of their treatment of Puerto Rico.
Exactly. So here's this Puerto Rican star who plays for that annoying team up in Canada who's in New York, and he won't stand for God's anthem. That pissed people off. And again, that brings us back to the fact that this is a human-voted thing. So all of those are factors. And whether or not he's a Hall of Famer, capital letters, maybe he's on that line. But the fact he fell off the ballot as quickly as he did is ridiculous. It's a complete joke.
So I just had to remind myself. So you mentioned he didn't get to 500 homers because he ended his career at 473.
473, yeah.
And then I was thinking, just what about Fred McGriff? And Fred McGriff ended his career at 493. So both fell short, and McGriff eventually got in. Hopefully, again, I got to spend my efforts getting Dave Stieb in, okay? But when I'm done getting Dave Stieb, I'm going to work on Carlos Delgado because those are two former Blue Jays I believe belong in the Hall of Fame. Okay. Should I skip ahead? No, I'm not going to. What I'm going to do with you right now, Keegan Matheson, yes, I am going to skip ahead. Okay, so there was that. So between the 93 World Series and 2015, and I was following the team very closely in that period, but it's, we had our Halladay and our Delgado, but this is a bit of a wasteland. Yeah. Like between 93's World Series and then 2015. Tough time to be growing up as a Jays fan.
Yeah, average teams that didn't spend enough. That's what it is. You had your Hallidays, your Delgados, some reasons to watch along the way. Vernon Wells came up through there and put up numbers, but there was never quite enough built around. Like, you didn't see the infrastructure and the ownership commitment that you're seeing right now. And they were trying to squeeze every ounce out of what they had, but the end result was teams that were stuck in the middle, which is the very worst place to be. They never tanked and got that first overall pick.
They were a third place AL East team.
Yeah, they were stuck in that middle, and that kills you because you're always picking 10th or 15th or 20th,
right?
Instead of getting that top young guy. It's not as pronounced in baseball as it is in NFL football or the NHL, NBA, but it's still killed them for years. And again, without the wild card, it changed everything, but it was just a blah era, kind of a forgotten, muddy, cloudy era of baseball that's probably best left muddy and forgotten. Thank goodness we have some reasons to move past it with 15 and 16, but just a strange one to...
So let's if people want to read more, and I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Keegan, but you said 2015, and I got excited for a moment because the hype train of 2015, I'm still kind of living off those fumes. So I don't get a commission on the sales, except it's a great book by a great guy. And if you give a shit about the Jays or baseball, you should get a copy of this. I'm going to read a note from an FOTM that was sent to me this morning regarding the book. This is from a gentleman we call in the TMU, the Toronto Mike Universe. We call this gentleman Midtown Gord.
All right.
I'm going to quote him, okay? Today I got home from work and made dinner. Said to my wife, I'm not sure where Pierce is. That's his almost 24-year-old son. Anyway, just a few minutes ago, he walked in with something behind his back. He said, I was at the Blue Jays game. I didn't realize he was going to the game. He said to me, I have you a late birthday or early Father's Day present. Then he presented me the new Keegan Matheson book.
I love it.
Signed by Keegan Matheson. I guess Keegan did a book signing at Sportsnet Bar after the game. I was there, Midtown Gord. I witnessed this firsthand. My son was one of the first people in line, so I must have missed Midtown Gord's son by this much.
I remember signing that one, yeah.
Okay. He didn't have cash, so Keegan gave Pierce his email, and he email transferred the funds. This is some great detail here. What a wonderful surprise. So he wants me to thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. That's fantastic. I remember signing that one to Gord. I'm glad.
Shout out to Midtown Gord. He's got his copy. And not baseball related, but I want to give some love to people who sacrificed all, like for our freedom, for our country. Do you know, Keegan Matheson, that 81 years ago today, Juno Beach, the Normandy invasion of D-Day, was 81 years ago today, June 6, 1944.
Wow.
And for those who don't know, Juno Beach, I'm shouting out, there were 5 beaches in that Normandy invasion. You might have seen Saving Private Ryan, but I'm shouting out Juno Beach because that's where the Canadian forces were, and specifically the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division and the 2nd Armored Brigade. And they were tasked with assaulting and securing this stretch of the beach, Juno Beach. 340 Canadians died that day, 81 years ago. 574 were wounded, 47 were captured. That's 961 casualties. But I get chills thinking about, because we're about to talk about a bat flip, and we talk about touching them all Joe, and we talk about Dave Stieb, and then I could feel as Tom Cheek's making these calls, I feel like goosebumps. But then I think about 81 years ago today, and it kind of puts in perspective that we're working in the toy department over here. You know what I mean? So 81 years ago today, many a brave Canadian were part of the Normandy invasion on D-Day. That was Juno Beach. All right, now I'm going to brilliantly segue back to the toy department, okay? And I'm going to play this clip and just ask you a little bit about this particular Blue Jays season, which I loved. Well, it was the best season since 93, so of course I loved it. Let's listen.
1-1 on Jose. All eyes on the mound and the bearded Sam Dyson. Now he comes set. Kicks the 1-1 pitch. Fly ball deep left field. Yes, sir. There she goes.
Some blur in there. And letting the crowd ride us. I love how Jerry...
Blue Jays 6, Rangers 3.
The designated hitter, number 10, Edwin Encarnacion.
You know, the guy who...
Jose Bautista is unbelievable.
Okay, we had a lot of Tom Cheek on the show. We had to get some FOTM Jerry Howarth in there. I love how he let the crowd carry that. But that was the bat flip. And again, we talk about that bat flip. I think we're starting to talk about it a bit like it was a walk-off or something. But that was the 7th inning, everybody.
Yeah, it's definitely remembered as a walk-off, strangely. But it's... an all-time moment, man. And for anyone that's under 38, 40, that's
so were you there at the
Dome? No, I was not. That was a couple years before. I started covering the team in 2017.
Right.
I've only been around for the bad stuff, but Jose's still got it, though, man. He's talking to him for this book. He still has that same edge. He's still like... He still looks like he could play. He has never changed a bit, and I never want him to. He's one of the best personalities in baseball all time.
No argument here. I got to talk to him at that Joe Carter Classic last year, and I'm back there in a couple of weeks, so we'll see who shows up for that one. A couple of quick notes. One is I'm glad we got some Jerry Howarth in there. I'm really glad Jerry Howarth got a big call.
Yeah.
Because he was supposed to call the 92. It was his turn to make that call, and he handed the mic to Tom Cheek and said, "You've been here since day one.
Yeah.
You take us home," and that's Tim Linda Carter.
Amazing. And Jerry deserved that for so very long, especially for how graciously he handled that. But Jerry's call on that was perfect. And how he let it breathe for a little bit.
But can I tell you what? Now I'm nitpicking here. Hey. I'm picking nits. Who's going to stop me? This is Toronto Mike. This isn't Toronto Keegan. Okay. I don't know why the game ops people have to bring in the music.
God.
I don't know why I have to. Even now I'm thinking, oh great, like YouTube's going to give me a block on that because I've got some song 2 in there. I don't understand if that at that moment, because we won't, we don't have time to go into it, but we know what happened in the top half of that inning.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a whole Sportsnet documentary, an hour long, on the 7th inning of this game, and it was what an inning. I still remember falling to the floor when Joey Bats hit that home run. I remember I was upstairs watching. I collapsed to the floor. My wife was there, and she's like, oh my goodness. I collapsed to the floor. Yeah. But I don't understand why you can't just let the Dome, I don't know, it was like 47,000 strong, going nuts. Just let that ride. You don't need to pipe in the blur.
So I'm anti-noise at all
here.
ballparks. I think every ballpark is too noisy, and we're trying to turn our whole lives into a TikTok video that's constantly blasting at us. But it's I don't think I've made many friends in the game ops department around this city.
Well, you don't need it. There, you don't need it.
Yeah.
You have to have a sense to let the crowd ride for a bit. And if you want an example of how to do it right in a game like that, when you have a full dome and it's a meaningful game like that, because obviously on a Tuesday night in May, maybe you need to juice it or whatever. But watch a soccer match, okay? I feel soccer's got it right. You don't have all this going on in soccer. The crowd generates the sound, and they go into the chants and the songs.
They don't need to be told to clap their hands when it's a tie game in the goddamn bottom of the ninth. It's incessant. It's too much. I hate it. I hate everything about it.
So that call, I love that call. I hate the fact, and I actually like song too, okay? But I hate the fact we got to hear a song during that quiet moment with the crowd. And while I'm doing this, I'm just going to say, and I hope Rogers is listening here, I was at the Dome yesterday. I had a book launch to attend, and I biked to the Dome yesterday. I don't know if you know that, Keegan Matheson. But I don't know why there's one statue outside that ballpark, and it's for the head of Rogers, Edward Rogers. I don't know why Ted Rogers gets the statue outside. Why is there no Joe Carter statue? Why have you not celebrated Jose Batista? What's up with that?
I think part of it's they don't own the land. That's excuse one.
But they have a statue there.
They can figure it out.
But they have a statue there.
They need to. They need statues. They need to honor their history better, period. I think something's going to be coming.
The Leafs have figured it out.
We don't really know what is coming, but Shapiro said a couple times something's in the plans. We'll see. But they need more. They need to do a better job of that. Museums, something outside. Statues in baseball just fit so well together.
We have these moments. We played a lot of them. I have one more to go here. But there are these moments in the history of this franchise which people can read about in your fine book. But it would be lovely to celebrate them. If I go to a Leafs game, I'm going to go say hi to Johnny Bauer and Wendell Clark.
Yeah.
Like, they're all there.
Absolutely.
Where the hell is John Eller? Okay, and then one more question from the live stream. This comes from Moose Grumpy. Who's next for the level of excellence, in your humble opinion?
Buck Martinez.
Really? I'm actually surprised.
Jerry Howarth, I think, should be there as well, next to Tom Cheek. I would love to see. But Buck, what he has meant to this organization is so rare. And there's some players, Edwin, Jimmy Key, are kind of on that conversation. I don't know if they're there. But what Buck has not just meant to this organization, but baseball in Canada, I think, as a player, a manager, and then a broadcaster forever, that's pretty rare, man. You're not going to see another Buck Martinez in this country. And working on his chapter made me appreciate that even more. I'll be a big proponent of Buck being on that level of excellence. I hope I cover that day someday. I'll be very proud to if it happens. But I hope it's when he can enjoy it as well.
Well, I think it's a no-brainer that when he decides it's time to hang it up, hang up the mic, the headphones, and call it a career. He's had a long, great career behind the plate and then broadcasting. I think that's your moment right there. Seize the moment.
Yeah.
I was thinking, what about a John Olerud? You mentioned Jimmy Key. I feel Jimmy Key, we haven't even mentioned his name, super overlooked, and maybe he was a bit overshadowed
really
by Dave
underrated,
Stieb.
Definitely.
Yeah, okay, so here's some possibilities here. I do see that, yes, okay. I'm just checking out who's on it right now. What about I don't see Tom Henke's name on this list.
No, it's, I don't know, for a reliever, I feel like they have to be like an all-time great maybe, but it's, there's a lot of guys like that, like Edwin, like Jimmy Key, who are kind of on that line. I don't know if they're kicking the door down, it's, you also don't want to go too long without adding somebody, right? They've just added Jose.
Jose Batista was added in fairly recently.
You don't want to go too long until the next guy, but I hope Buck's up there.
Okay. Now, that's one more call from Jerry, and then one more topic I want to talk to you on our way out. You've been amazing.
Thank you.
I hope I'm not taking... I don't know if we ever talked about how much time I would take, but here I am just taking as much time as I want.
Is that all good? I've got a few more minutes.
Okay, a few more minutes? Okay. So one more call because FOTM Jerry Howarth got to make this call.
Even though they've turned a lot of double plays. Oh, there's a drive to deep left field, and the ball game is over.
This should be a statue.
I think I have multiple calls here, so stay tuned here. television call, right?
Yeah.
I thought I pulled Jerry, but I messed up everybody. Let's see what I got here. Even now there's music going on, right? Like, just let the crowd go. The horn, I can almost live with the horn because it's like a home run horn thing, but you don't need the beats. Okay, so there's a long, again, this is not the Jerry Howarth call, if you heard that voice. I think I set it up incorrectly. But this was the walk-off in 2016. So before I talk some Shohei Ohtani with you, the 2015-2016 teams, like, what did it mean to this franchise? And maybe a little word on why the Rogers decided to replace Alex Anthopoulos and Paul Beeston kind of in the midst of this, I guess. Yeah.
Well, it brought them back and made the Blue Jays cool again. They were not cool for a very long time. Happened a few years later with the Raptors. And just being cool, being a social destination matters in pro sports. It's how you make money. It's how you keep a fan base. And Edwin's moment, like him standing atop home plate with his arms straight up in the air, that should be a statue in this city, I think. And that walk-off win against Ubaldo Jimenez. Why the hell he was in the game, I don't know, but God bless it. Those teams, they had some attitude. You know, you look at Bautista, Encarnacion, Josh Donaldson, my God. You look at even the pitchers they had from Stroman through adding David Price and Russell Martin to all of that, who was all attitude at the time.
Yeah.
They could beat you, but they could also kick your ass if something happened. And that's why people loved them. They had an edge to them, and it captured the city, like completely captured the city again. And we're still chasing that high. It hasn't come back. It hasn't been close.
Well, we haven't won a playoff game since 2016.
Since I showed up.
Yeah, Keegan, can you go somewhere else, please?
Happily.
So much love. I'm of the belief that maybe we didn't need to bring in Mark Shapiro from Cleveland. What do I know, though? I don't cover baseball, but I do know that after years and years of disappointment and feeling, and this is me speaking for me, so I don't want Jays fans to get mad at me, but it just felt like there were no consequences, and we just kept bringing back Shapiro would be president, I suppose, and then Atkins as GM. And then we're going to talk in a moment about Shohei Ohtani, that this season, 2025, I'm not really following this team at all. Like, this is why we're winding down here. I know I said I'd close with Shohei Ohtani, but I want to ask you about Allison Gordon.
Yeah.
Because tell us about Allison Gordon and how important she was, like a trailblazer.
Yeah, well, Allison Gordon was the first woman to be a full-time beat writer of a Major League Baseball team, and was running up against years in the era. She came in the early 80s, coming out of the late 70s, where women being in the clubhouse to report on Major League Baseball was not just an issue, but it was banned, and it was a matter of the courts at that point. And her coverage in the Toronto Star, number one, like brilliant, lively writing, fun storytelling writing. Her book, Foul Balls, if you can find a copy of that on eBay or buried in a library somewhere, is an incredible look into that era of baseball. But how she handled that and how she wrote about that. I mean, I am 6'2" and big and have a loud voice and a beard. When I walk into a clubhouse, I fit. I do not know how it feels to not fit in a clubhouse. And I benefit from that every single day when I walk into that clubhouse, of at least looking and sounding what people consider to be baseball-y. And for Allison Gordon to walk into that clubhouse as a woman in 2025 is still far more difficult than what I do. But in the early 1980s, incredible. I'm so grateful that I got to learn more about Allison Gordon and read her book, which is fantastic. I recommend anyone who can get it. But And then some of the books she wrote later in her career about a character who was a baseball writer but like solved crimes. Incredible. But I loved writing that chapter, and I think that we as writers and media in this city need to do a better job of kind of remembering and commemorating people that came before us, and what she did stands above so many others and is really special. I want us to all remember what she did in her career.
No, I'm glad you had this multiple chapters on the storytellers, and we talked about Tom and Jerry quite a bit, and of course the great Dan Schulman, and there's a voice for you. And Buck Martinez, we're going to get him on the level of excellence, but Allison Gordon has a chapter as well. So thank you, Keegan, for writing about Allison Gordon. All right, we're going to close with Shohei Ohtani.
Hey.
Because it's fairly recent, but you have a great chapter. I'm on page 86 of your book, which you have autographed for me. But why did you call me Midtown Gord? Just kidding here. I love it here. You, signed it for me, Toronto Mike. Only Mikes in Toronto can buy this off me. It'll be on eBay in about a half an hour. Just kidding. Just take us home, the greatest hits of the Shohei Ohtani chapter.
Yeah, I saved a lot for this book on Ohtani. I was there as it all happened in Nashville as that all broke loose. So I kind of set the stage for that chapter, taking you behind the scenes of what it was like to cover that and how strange it was. Very, very, very strange. But also some more information that has not been out there yet on what the Blue Jays did to try to court Shohei Ohtani, what happened when he toured their facility, what he was interested in, what the Blue Jays had set up for him, for his dog, for everything else, and how secretively all of that happened. And also some more information on how close the Blue Jays really were. I do not think they were used. And I think that's kind of a crutch that people in Toronto use a lot, but we're a big city and a cool city. People want to come here. It's not always being used.
We were a strong second? Is that fair to say?
We're not always being used by Big Brother in New York or LA, okay? And this chapter left me with a greater appreciation for how close it really was. But this chapter has the most new info in it, definitely in the book. There will be an excerpt of it tomorrow, Saturday, in the Toronto Star. Actually, it's run in digital, but this will be in print in the Saturday Star. But that one was fun to write and fascinating to report because there is some info that hadn't been out there before, and it's just a story that fascinated me. No, they didn't get him. That chapter's not going to bring him back, and I'm sorry for that. But I think as time moves on, I think I'm still interested in it as a story, and I wanted to kind of preserve that in time.
Well, thank you for covering that moment. That I can tell you, we had a TMLX event at Palma's Kitchen. We were live recording. It was the day after we thought he was on that flight.
Oh, yeah.
And my guest on the mic starting that TMLX recording, which you can find in the feed, was Stephen Brunt.
Wow.
And just chatting with Stephen Brunt. Let's get a statue of Stephen Brunt outside that dome, okay? But chatting with Stephen Brunt about what we thought when and the misreporting that he was on his way. And then it was a dragon from Dragon's Den. Robert, who was on that plane, and just this cluster fuck. And then, of course, while we were recording that episode, Ohtani put on Instagram he was a Dodger.
Amazing.
You're amazing, Keegan.
Thank you.
You're amazing, buddy. I root for you. You kind of have, my last guest on Toronto Mike was Scotty Mack.
Oh, I love it. Good.
Scott MacArthur. And you kind of have flipped stories.
Yeah,
because,
we traded,
Yeah.
We had to balance it out.
He's a GTA guy.
Yeah.
Who sold his Toronto condo to go to the Maritimes.
Yep.
Because he literally felt like that's where he should be.
Yeah.
And he's no longer in media, but we talk about this in the most recent episode.
I'm happy for him.
But he's happy.
Good.
He's in great condition. He's a happy man. And you're a Maritimer who felt a calling. I remember your story about, I guess you were working at a bank and the beer, and you ended up coming here.
Yeah.
And now you've got all these people coming out to see you, to get you to sign your book and take selfies with you. You're a BFD. You're a big ticket in this city, Keegan Matheson.
I appreciate it. I'm glad that Scotty Mack's balancing me out, though. We can't tilt the scales too much to the big city. The big city gets enough advantages.
And you're both sweethearts.
Hey.
Are you going to post any thirst trap photos on your social media?
No, I need to get in shape like him first, I need to grow the hair out.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,706th show. Go to TorontoMike.com for all your Toronto Mike needs. Buy a copy of The Franchise, A Curated History of the Jays by Keegan Matheson, forward by John Gibbons. Buck Martinez says it's a terrific read, so get a copy. If somebody buys a copy, Could they get you to sign it somehow?
Oh, yeah. Anytime. If you're at a game, let me know. Text me. I'll meet you outside at gates. We'll do a couple signings later in the month, in July probably as well, but we'll make it happen.
And I noticed you're still very active on the app formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, there. And Blue Sky, Instagram.
Okay, find Keegan Matheson. Find him anywhere. Much love to all who made this possible. That's Great Lakes Brewery, Palma Pasta, Moneris, Toronto Maple Leafs Baseball, RecycleMyElectronics.ca, Building Toronto Skyline, and Ridley Funeral Home. Checking my calendar in real time. Who's next? Because this is a Friday. I don't like recording on weekends. Too busy with family things. Let's see what's going on Monday. Okay, my next episode is a new sub-series we're calling Rewinder with Blair Packham. We're going to talk about the Canadian media landscape. It's a new thing. I'll explain it all in the next episode, but you don't want to miss it. See you all then.